The second round of talks between the Israelis and Palestinians since Annapolis ends in failure due to settlement activity. Can Mahmoud Abbas hold firm in forcing this issue to the top of the agenda for future negotiations, or will Israel have its way? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Imran Garda. Palestinians must clamp down on militants and Israelis must bring all settlement building to a halt. Those are the commitments outlined in the 2003 roadmap, which both Israeli and Palestinian leaders committed to once again last month at Annapolis. But negotiations seem to be stalling on one of the thorniest issues, Israel's illegal settlement building program. Hugo McPherson has more.
Just this week, Israel announced a $25 million plan to expand 2 large settlements in occupied East Jerusalem. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas expressed his disappointment on Monday.
In every meeting, including the one we are holding now with the Israeli counterparts, the main topic is stopping the building of settlements. We demand that now.
Monday's news also brought second-round talks between Palestinian and Israeli negotiators to a halt. The Israeli settlement program is one of the thorniest issues for the peace process. There are 122 official Israeli settlements in the West Bank alone, and around 100 unauthorized settlement outposts. The Palestinians say halting the expansion of Jewish settlements is fundamental to a lasting agreement. Settlements remain illegal under international law, but this week Israel's latest plans have drawn criticism from the US, which wants to see the roadmap back on track and see a year's intense diplomatic efforts bear fruit.
Now, the latest settlement plans come amid indications that Israel's population is actually dropping. Figures released this year show that Israel's birth rate has dropped steadily over the last 4 years. And now numbers of people moving into Israel have dropped to their lowest levels in 2 decades. Fewer than 20,000 newcomers arrived in 2007. But numbers of those emigrating from Israel this year is at the same rate, with around 20,000 people leaving Israel this year. Shimon Shetrit, who is a professor of law at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and a former minister of the Israeli government, shares the Israeli government view of building in occupied East Jerusalem.
For the Israeli side, Jerusalem is considered the territory within Israel because it was, according to the law of 1967, defined, certain areas were defined as the territory of Israel. Of course, it is subject to negotiation, but the policy of Israel does not distinguish between building inside Jerusalem or building in Tel Aviv. In order to be realistic, one should remember what President Bush has made a statement regarding the demographic or the practical situation on the ground will have to be taken into account. So it is, I think, a hope or expectation without any basis to think that certain neighborhoods in Jerusalem that have been occupied in 67 but have been since settled by hundreds of thousands of Israelis, that it is at all possible or realistic to think that it would be part of the negotiation.
While joining us to discuss the stagnant peace process are our guests in Jerusalem, MacKay AbdelHadi, head of the Palestinian Academic Society in Jerusalem. Also in Jerusalem, Seidemann, lawyer and expert on Jerusalem. And in Washington, D.C., Paul Sham, scholar at the Middle East Institute. I'm going to start off with Seidemann. First, let's establish exactly what these developments are. Israel says that these are merely extensions of current settlements and that territories like Har Homa are within Israel and that Israel is not contravening the roadmap. Your thoughts on that?
If Annapolis means anything, it is that the parties are committed to negotiating the core issues of the conflict and to negotiate them in good faith. It also entails a recommitment to the roadmap. Nothing undermines the credibility of this process more than unilateral actions that dictate the outcome of final status. This is the first test of leadership for the 3 major protagonists emerging from Oslo. For Mr. Olmert, it's important to emphasize it is not possible to negotiate in good faith the future status of Jerusalem and to simultaneously dictate the outcome of those talks by means of a bulldozer. For Abu Mazen, it's a test. Can I deliver through my methodology of nonviolence in negotiations in ways that the Hamas cannot? Above all, this is a test for President Bush. The Oslo process failed because the undertakings of the parties were treated with a wink and a nod. If the Annapolis process is going to succeed, the president has to lay down ground rules. And those ground rules have to be very clear. Zero tolerance for violence, zero tolerance for terror, zero tolerance for incitement, but also zero tolerance for expansion of settlements that will predetermine the borders between Israel and Palestine. Israel
sorry to interrupt you. Are you saying that this is all spin from Israel and that they're just trying to firmly establish facts on the ground?
I believe that my prime minister is genuine in his declaration that he wants to negotiate the core issues. I don't believe he had advanced knowledge or consent of this, but that doesn't make a difference. This has been done, and it's a test, and he has to send a clear message to the domestic saboteurs in Israel, to the bureaucracy. There will be no tolerance for predisposition of final status. Prime Minister Olmert can go and meet with Abu Mazen and say, I believe Har Homa must be part of Israel, and we're going to negotiate that. But we will not dictate it by means of earth-moving equipment.
Let's bring in Mahmoud AbdelHadi. Mr. AbdelHadi, does Har Homa cut Bethlehem off from the rest of the West Bank? And what do you think is the wisdom from the Israelis behind splitting the geographical contiguity of a possible future Palestinian state?
Well, what you are witnessing is not it is Jabal Abu Ghneim and not Har Homa, as the Israeli called it. And it is an Arab territory. It's a Palestinian part of the occupied territories. What you are witnessing today, Israelis negotiating Israelis, not only on Jerusalem, but on a deal with the Palestinians. At the same time, you are witnessing Abu Mazen standing on a bridge with two heads open, one to the world telling them, please help me to keep my seat and bring the Israelis halfway. And on the other end, you find Olmert is full of contradiction and living a catastrophe about his old policy as old mayor of Jerusalem with a plan 2010 to annex completely Jerusalem. What you are talking about in Jerusalem, believe it or not, it has been 6.5 square kilometers under the Jordanian in 1949 till 1967. Israel expanded on the West Bank territories to become 70 square kilometers. And today, these 70 square kilometers are part of the 108 kilometers of all Jerusalem. So Israelis are negotiating on what land they are grabbing and how funds they are going to put and what to annex, while the Palestinians are standing behind international law, international legitimacy, calling Israelis not only to hold settlement, but to rectify the damages they have been doing for the last 40 years in Jerusalem, as well as to meet them halfway in delivering the goods.
Paul Sham in D.C. Will renewed settlement activity make it very difficult to even discuss final borders for a possible Palestinian state?
There's no question it makes things more difficult, and as Danny Seidemann said, it's the first test of the Annapolis process. Of course, here everything is closed down, it's Christmas, but I would imagine that Secretary of State Rice will repeat, perhaps in stronger terms, her warning of last week, saying that additional building, obviously referring to Har Homa Jabal Abu Ghneim, is not good for the peace process, to put it mildly. And of course, what we're seeing is a test by people in Olmert's cabinet. Olmert now has to decide whether he is a politician who is managing Israeli interests or whether he's a statesman and can manage to control those interests in larger terms. We haven't seen yet whether he's willing and able to do it, and he's supposed to be meeting with Abu Mazen tomorrow. The question is how he is going to present it and whether he can deal with his own cabinet in expressing the views to the world that Israel will negotiate, will not take unilateral action.
Interesting that you mentioned the U.S. criticism. We'll come to that a little bit later on in the program, but I want to go to Danny Seidemann. How credible is this natural growth claim by the Israelis, which they say necessitates building more settlements? Surely it doesn't add up when you consider low immigration, high emigration, and low birth rates compared to Arabs.
I would say that the demographic claim is disingenuous, to say the least, and it's disingenuous at two levels. Number one, Israel does have construction needs, but there is no direct link between the construction at Har Homa and Israel's genuine housing concerns. This is blatantly political in a highly sensitive area, in an area that is disputed, and Israel can address its housing needs adequately elsewhere. The second level is more telling. For the last 40 years, the mantra in Jerusalem has been to maintain the demographic balance. That means to engage in massive construction for Israelis and to thwart Palestinian development in order to assure a large Israeli majority. The moment that it is internalized, that we comprehend that Jerusalem will be a politically divided city, Jerusalem need not build massive construction for Israelis, because we will not be trying to keep pace with Palestinian birth rates. Al-Quds of Mahmoud AbdelHadi, my friend and colleague, will be the capital of Palestine. Yerushalayim will be the capital of Israel. And both of these communities could develop organically without the calculus of national struggle.
Mahmoud AbdelHadi, just for some context before we go away to a break, give us some insight into the type of life a settler lives compared to Palestinians in occupied territories. Is it true that water is diverted from the Palestinian areas in the West Bank to sustain the Ma'ali Adumim settlement?
Well, it's not only water. Today in my neighborhood in Wadi Joz, in East Jerusalem, a house was demolished. The other day, the other house were demolished. It's the question of the daily life of Jerusalemites. They are cut off from their neighborhoods. The wall is becoming like sharp knife cutting our flesh, as well as separating us from an area to an area and becoming Israelites. They are imposing Israeli policies and practices on Jerusalem for the last 40 years. Daniel would know very well the story of many neighborhoods and how people are struggling to survive. We are in Jerusalem today, 250,000 Jerusalemites. They moved 185,000 Israelis to East Jerusalem with 12 settlements. And now they are opening a tunnel and building bridges as well as bypass roads and limiting our daily life constraints in terms of taxation, in terms of housing, in terms of movement. The challenge now, if Abu Mazen and Salam Fayyad will put tomorrow $2 billion for housing projects for Arab neighborhood in Jerusalem to challenge the Israelis' policies of housing in Jerusalem, what the answer will be. Today, if the Palestinians will tell the Israelis, fine, you Israelites, the city of Jerusalem, annex us, give us full right, complete right, let's have it one state, democratic state, what they will answer about the Jewishness of the Israeli state. The problem today, we are living in a divided city with two identities, two culture, two heritage, but have been forced to live under occupation policies and practices, and we have a huge file of international law, international legitimacy, United Nations resolution, Security Council resolution, condemning Israeli policies and practices. Every inch has been annexed, contained by the Israelis. We were 6.5 square kilometers. Today, it is 70 square kilometers on the West Bank. What they are building today and expanding, it is on the West Bank territory. It is representing 28% of the West Bank. The question of Jerusalem is becoming now not only a symbolic question or religious problem, but it is the West Bank itself. What is left for Palestinians if they are negotiating for a state? What is left today is 10% of the occupied territories. The Jordan Valley, which represent 26% of the West Bank, has been closed as buffer zone and governed by 4,000 to 5,000 Israeli settlers.
All right, Mahmoud AbdelHadi, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we need to take a break. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We need to take a break. Stay with us, gentlemen. When we come back, we discuss the possible U.S. role as the sole peace broker capable of influencing Israel's policies. Do stay with us.